There we go. Oh my gosh, this is
Hey guys, we're back with another episode of the Think Outside Fishing Podcast, brought to you by baits.com. We got a special guest coming on, Nick Lindner, Northland Tackle Pro, and we're going to talk a little bit about what's coming up here real soon in the North Country, and that's ice fishing. Everyone's getting real excited about it, so it's coming soon.
Hello.
Here we go. Hey, Nick.
Hey, Chuck. How's it going?
It's going good.
That's good. I'm excited for some ice here and doing a little bit of fall fishing, but man, I'm like getting super, super itchy for some ice. So
Have you been checking for any safe ice yet, or?
yeah, I was just out on 5 inches last night.
Okay.
No, one thing I really do like to do this time of year is just keep track of the forecast in a lot of different places. So last year for first ice, like very first ice of the year, I actually found it over in kind of the Devil's Lake area of North Dakota. And honestly, there's other places like Canada, even Red Lake that usually freezes before, before that area specifically. But one thing I was doing last year was just paying attention to all the different places where there could be first ice and just watching the weather for that. And for whatever reason, that area was colder than, like, it was 10 degrees colder that week in the Devil's Lake area than it was up in Winnipeg. So we got ice. We got ice before the Canadians last year. So
Yeah.
anyway, obviously I'm going to be paying attention to, what's going on in Manitoba and Ontario, but also, northern Minnesota, Bemidji, Red Lake area and stuff too.
It's just kind of one of those cool things where we have such a different seasons on different regions where everyone's just paying attention to all these reports and trying to figure out, their next or their first ice fishing trip of the season.
Yeah.
And, it might change one way or the other by a week or two or even 3 weeks. But really hoping that we, have good ice this year and can really get after it.
Yeah. No, me too. And I think a lot of people, they have like a first ice or early ice tradition, right? Where a lot of people will, run up to Red Lake, the first weekend that the resorts open it up or whatever. Or some people, for their very first ice trip of the season will wait for, their favorite small local lake or whatever. Or maybe they'll go to Mille Lacs for their first ice trip of the year. So everybody's got their own traditions. I don't really have any traditions. I like to just kind of go wherever I can find it first. So
Yeah. No, myself, usually like to start the year off going to Red Lake if that's, it's usually one of the first places that freezes over and has safe ice to go out on. Like you said last year, you were able to get on over in the Dakotas, get
yeah.
out fishing before most people.
Yep.
But
Yeah. And a lot of times that there's so many variables when it comes to early ice. Obviously a big one is just going to be temperature, freezing temperatures at night, and 15 degrees is just significantly better than 25 degrees, so temperature matters a lot when you're making ice. But a couple of the underlooked things, obviously a lot of people know, like these shallower fisheries, like Upper Red Lake, for example, that's just going to be conducive to making ice. But another big thing too is just pay attention to the wind, because if it's really cold but the wind is ripping, it's going to take a long time for it to freeze over, or it's going to freeze. Different parts are going to freeze, and then they're going to pack up on the wind blown side of the lake. So tons and tons of variables. But my best piece of advice would be to go a little bit later than you want to, because you want to be ultra safe. You know, when you're out on first ice, it can be super, super sketchy, especially if you're, you know, just kind of someone who goes out every now and then, you know, and isn't necessarily out every day.
Exactly. No, it safety is definitely number one. So
Probably number one.
then catching fish, but so like I want to get into some of the new products that we have coming on the Northland side. But first, I just want to ask, you know, what are some of like the first couple, memories of ice fishing, and have you always been like huge in ice fishing, or is there like been certain years that you hit it hard, or what how do you fall in love with hitting the ice,
Yeah.
so hard?
Yeah. No, that's a good question. I mean, I don't know that I fell in love with ice fishing when I was a kid per se. I had a lot of fun ice fishing, you know, but like I grew up in such a super, super diehard fishing family
Mm-hmm.
that like we never just like set up a pop-up and, you know, drove the truck out on the lake and just caught, you know, 3 dozen bluegills. That just like didn't happen a lot when I was a kid. I want to say the first time I ever fished in like a fish house wasn't, you know, like when I was an adult or like, you know, a late teenager or something.
Right.
So like even when I was little, like 10, 12 years old, you know, fishing outside, hauling gear through 2 foot of snow across the lake, you know, whatever. So I guess what I'm getting at is I did quite a bit of ice fishing when I was younger with my dad. We do a lot of like alternative type ice fishing opportunities. My dad he likes to do uh, kind of some of the underappreciated bites. So we'd catch like channel catfish through the ice on like some of the reservoirs here in Minnesota. So that was always a really fun one. Catfish are hugely underrated when it comes to ice fishing. And then the other one that we would do quite a bit is fishing for whitefish through the ice. And that was always like a little bit more grindy, trying to hunt them down, trying to, you
Mm-hmm.
know, get on top of them and catch them. Once you encounter them, they're really fun because they dart around really fast. They chase super hard. So those were a few things that I did growing up. And actually another one I did a lot growing up was fishing for lake trout. And lake trout are so fun. They're
Yeah.
just like the most, you know, amped up, super fun fish to chase through the ice. So I did a lot of that, but you asked like what made me love ice fishing. And for me, it was just the feedback that you get while ice fishing. Obviously, always a fan of open water fishing. Growing up, like didn't have forward facing sonar, you know, growing up when I was a kid. So like it's just, you know, fan casting, you know, doing your best, you know, doing all the things you do without forward facing. But when you get to ice fishing, you're in a stationary location and we're using flashers back in the day. You know, so you get to look straight down underneath your hole and you get to see fish actually come up and eat your bait. And in some cases as well, like using underwater cameras, or just cutting a bigger hole and looking down the hole on sight fishing. And I just love the feedback of ice fishing. So it's always been, you know, ever since I, you know, started doing it, it's always been one of my favorites just because I always loved the feedback of seeing the fish react and eat versus kind of blindly fan casting or stuff like that.
Yeah, and one thing that, I forget and maybe you do too is just like, how regional ice fishing is to our area and how, lucky we are to be able to do that. There's so many, I mean, it's a small region when you look at
Yep.
it compared to everywhere else. So, um, it's
Yeah.
definitely unique and
Hmm.
something that you might take for granted. Some people might take for granted. So,
Yeah.
and
I
then,
mean,
like you
we have a lot
said,
of opportunities for sure,
yeah,
right? I mean, you look at places like Iowa or Illinois and they get ice, right? But they might not some years, or they might not
Right.
get very good ice some years, or a really tight window. And we just have like this really solid season, where I was just texting someone and they're from New York, and they said, well, when are you going to get ice? And I was like, well, we pretty much always get ice like second half of November, like pretty consistently. And the ice pretty much always leaves like the first week of April, so we have this nice big consistent ice season, and like a really good variety of species to catch where we live.
And like you said on like the return, that's something like when you're ice fishing, you're fishing right down below you, and we've been using electronics to get that return, more so than recent years with
Forward
open
facing.
water using forward facing sonar and stuff. So I think that is something unique. And I was kind of the same way growing up. Like we'd go ice fishing here and there, but seemed like I definitely got into it more in college. And I think
Mhm.
overall, there's ice fishing's kind of blown up. Last
Yeah.
I don't know how many years, but definitely more people doing it, I think, than ever, for sure.
Yeah. No, I would 100% agree with that. And like ice fishing has just gotten less and less miserable over the years, I guess you could say. Like way back in the day, I mean, you're going out in your work boots and Carhartts and freezing your butt off and sitting on a bucket and whatever. And like you can still do that, obviously, but um, like boots are so much better now. Ice suits are so much better now. We have fish houses that are awesome and warm, and heaters that are reliable, and super tactical
Right.
uh super tactical rods and reels and stuff that work in the cold, and like line that isn't just mono from back in the day that would get all coiled up and not perform well in the winter. And yeah, lures that are just so much better than they used to be. Lures were kind of like a crap show back in the day. I mean, I shouldn't say that it wasn't bad, but like they've gotten so much better, and
Hmm.
there's like so much variety and stuff too. So yeah, it's like so much nicer to ice fish than it was back in the day. And I
Yeah, it
think
just
that's
allows
part of
you
why it's
to
so popular.
it
Yeah.
allows you to, the hardcore guys and everyone else just to get out fishing no matter the weather almost. Like
Yeah.
it kind of seemed like, before you'd really want to pick out the right days to get out there. And
Yeah. Yeah. No, for sure.
so,
It's so much easier now. And like you were saying too before with just sonar, like I think when forward facing sonar came around and busted onto the scene, it wasn't as like insane of a shocking thing as maybe it was for people down south or in some of the more traditional bass markets and stuff like that. Because like you said, half the year we've been watching fish react to our baits already with 2D
yeah,
sonar. And a
for,
lot of guys would take, so if you're from the south and you don't understand what ice fishing is, like we have our screen, we have a cord that goes down to the transducer, and the transducer is basically like this like cone shaped puck, and it sends out like a sonar signal kind of in sort of a cone to some degree, but it's a pretty tight cone, because you're pretty much with, it's basically 2D sonar essentially.
mhm,
But guys back in the day, before forward facing, they would take that cone and they'd spin it around in the hole, and you actually could see which direction the fish had moved. Like if you're on a school of crappies or stuff, something like that, you could kind of flick that transducer around, and you could see, well, they're not under me. Where did they go? And you'd move the transducer until you could see, oh, there they are. They're some distance to our left or whatever.
right.
Um, so yeah, I guess long story short, it wasn't as big of a shock. Obviously, it's insane, right? Even like some of the very, very first forward facing technology, it was like mind blowing, right? But it
Hmm.
wasn't something that was like completely foreign, I would say. So anyway, I could go,
Yeah.
you know,
I
I
agree.
could get into that, for like an hour probably.
All right. Well, let's get into some of these new products we got coming from Northland Tackle. What do we got here?
All right.
New.
Yeah. So this one, you want to talk about this one first right here? Twitching
Yeah, let's
puppet?
do it. This one We showed off at ICAST this year, but it just launched today. This podcast come out Thursday, but this is a new twitching puppet, and
Yeah.
this design is based off our pitching puppet, which is real similar bait. Had lots of success with it. This is a smaller version of it, designed to put down the ice hole,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's
Oh, you got one
got
too. There we
it's
go.
got
We have a bigger size and a smaller size here as well. So couple different varieties, whether you're chasing for panfish, the smaller one's an 1/8 ounce size and the bigger one is a 1/4 ounce. And yeah, I guess, I don't know. I mean, do we want to get into some of the features here?
yeah. I mean, this is kind of more of an aggressive bait, but it's not super loud. It's a glide bait style lure, that's gonna go jumps around in circles like that all the time. It's designed all in one piece, over molded resin, so it's not gonna break or anything. It's gonna be real durable. Um,
Yeah, absolutely. No, I would say if you're familiar with glide baits and you've fished all different types of glide baits before, the action of this is not hyper aggressive. When you pull it, it's going to jump out to the side, but it's not going to like fly out to the side. So it's a little bit less aggressive, which I actually like through the ice. So I'm a big fan of that. And a lot of that's just based on the shape of the fin in the back. So that's kind of why it does what it does. But for me, what I like about this is I do like that you can kind of turn fish up by just kind of having that little bit of a darting action, So this isn't necessarily like a lift and drop. This is something you want to pop a little bit, and the fish really like it. A lot of times with spoons, right? You jig up, and kind of come straight up and might flutter a little bit to the left or the right, or kind of come up and down, vertically. But this thing goes horizontally, which is a little bit of a different look. So when you pop it out to the side, it kind of gets the fish sort of turned up a little bit. But the other thing that I do like about these is the profile. So when you're talking about like walleyes, for example, I would say 80+% of the baits that they see through the ice are vertical shaped baits, a lot of times spoons. And this has a horizontal profile. And I have found that the fish can get a little bit more aggressive with something that's more horizontal shape. So the horizontal profile, I think, can be really big. One thing we don't talk about enough with ice fishing is profile. You go to some places like Lake Winnipeg, and in a lot of cases, you have to have a larger profile, and something that's a little bit not as thin, but more, wider and a little bit bulkier, just because that's what those fish want to feed on. So having that horizontal profile is really big. And yeah, you can tip this thing with minnow head, worms, anything like that. But also, this is the kind of bait where you don't always necessarily have to tip it. And then I guess I'll be the one rambling here. I'll just keep on rambling. Some of my thoughts with this. So you have the 1/4 ounce size. When I like to use that, for me, this is like a large offering for a crappie or a perch or something like that. But I will also say this is I would consider this to be a pretty sweet, kind of like bite size, smaller profile for walleyes. So you can actually, in some cases, like replace, or I shouldn't say replace, but you can supplement like your normal glide bait, like a puppet minnow or something like that, with something that's a little bit smaller, and you can get some of that same action in just a little bit more of a bite-sized package. So that's one place where I like to use these a lot.
I definitely see it. It's gonna be a great lure for first ice on Red Lake. It's
Yeah.
definitely gonna be an overlooked walleye lure. even myself, like I'm thinking of it as more of a crappie, perch, panfish style lure because we do have, the smaller size.
Yeah.
And obviously, we were out with Bro last year a couple times and just smacked the jumbo perch on it. Like this is definitely gonna be a perch
Mhm.
killer. So
Oh yeah. No, 100%. And actually perch are so weird because perch do like the larger profile, but they don't necessarily come in and want to woof the profile. Like for years and years, I've used glide baits and rattle baits for perch, and you look at that and you'd be like, well, they no chance they could even fit those in their mouth. But they really like that profile. The profile brings them in, and then it's so weird. Perch will just come up and they'll just nip at the treble hook. And
yeah,
like bonus points if you have a little minnow head on there or a couple worms um, on there, but like they like the big profile, and then just like the treble underneath finishes the deal. So yeah, these are going to be dynamite for perch for sure. And this 1/8 ounce size, I mean, for me, this is going to be purely, I mean, you could use it for walleye, but for me, it's purely going to be a panfish setup. This is going to be just like ideal for uh, basing crappies or crappies over the weeds, perch in pretty much all conditions. And I was actually out with Brian Brosdahl another time, a different time, and we were actually cracking bluegills on this. And this is not something that I would, think about bluegills right away, but viable option. So it's just a good profile. It has good hooks on it. It's something a little bit different than what the fish are used to seeing. It has good action and it also has a bunch of good colors. So you can really do a lot with it. Like you said, Red Lake is going to be a good option. That is one of the few places in Minnesota where I've consistently been able to get on, a decent rattle bait bite. And a lot of that is just having that bigger profile in that darker water. And this isn't a rattle bait, but it is a bigger profile. It's a bigger horizontal profile like a rattle bait. So a little bit more finesse than a rattle bait, but also a little bit of a different action.
one thing I really like about it using it last winter is just like it's kind of hard to explain, but just the return on your rod tip when you're pulsing it upwards, you can just feel everything. You can feel the tension pulling down on your rod when you're sweeping it upwards, and you can feel that thing, going back and forth. We also fished with it, underwater camera, and we got some
Yeah.
cool underwater footage of it too. And like you said, putting some bait on the hooks like that, on the underwater camera, you're gonna see the perch. They're just gonna come up and eat the treble and the bait that's on the treble. And you might think like, well, they just want to eat, the bait on the end of the hook, but the bait's what, the lure is calling them in. And we've
Yes.
seen that where, you know, school's kind of off of where we're sitting a little bit, and you get a little lull in there, and bro might, put the bigger size down there, and he likes to keep his bait, way higher in the column than most people that I know, and that's something I learned from him is just
Yeah.
keeping that bait way up in the column, and he calls that fish over, and then all of a sudden we're catching them one after another. So
Yeah. Yeah. And perch are visual feeders. That's why having that bigger profile definitely matters. And yeah, a lot of times too, it's also just having the option to give your bait a little bit more action. Because when the fish aren't super aggressive, sometimes you pop that bait and just give it a little pop, and it'll kind of trigger their like aggressive instincts. So that's kind of what I like to think about this is just like a really good like for something like perch, just like a really good delivery system for bait that also allows you to give it some action and do some stuff like that. So
it's
yeah.
one of those baits that you can have bait on there and you're catching them, and if your bait comes off, I'm still throwing it right back down there on the school. So that's another big thing that I like is not having to, bait every single time when you're on fish. So it's
Yeah.
a fish catcher.
And just to be clear, some people will take this out of the box and never ever put bait on it.
Exactly.
So probably out of just about any profile or any type of category of lure, outside of a rattle bait, probably this profile is gonna, be fish baitless more than anything.
Exactly.
So should we hit the next one, or anything else we want to touch on with that?
Well, I don't know if you got all the colors there, but I guess I do got this super cool color, black galaxy, which is something that we don't have in any of our other ice lures, so I'm excited about that one. And we also have that coming in the tungsten forage spoon, which is the next one I want to talk about.
Yeah.
And I'm excited about that one because we have the tungsten buckshot in our lineup, and the forage spoon is real similar to that. It doesn't have a rattle, and it's been a crucial part of the arsenal in Northland Ice Spoon. So let's see if you got one to hold up.
You never sent me any. No, I do have one right here. One of my favorite colors. You know what that one is?
Oh
The
yeah,
race car.
blue race car.
Blue race car. So what's cool about these, for me, is if there was ever a spoon to make in tungsten, or to remake, or make a tungsten version of, it would be the forage spoon, in my opinion. And that's because when I think of the forage spoon, I'm thinking of what is the most finesse spoon profile that I can take and put down there. And like if I'm chasing walleyes, finesse spoon profile that I can put a little minnow head on the bottom here. And obviously, when you have something in lead, it's just going to be bigger, right? And when you have it in tungsten, it's going to be even smaller. So you take a finesse package like the forage spoon and you make it in tungsten and you get something that's way smaller. So this guy right here, I don't know if there's like a good way to like show you how, oh boy, I can't. This is so tricky for me. Keeping it in front of the camera. The people who are listening to the podcast have no idea what I'm talking about. But like you take something like this, this is a tiny little spoon and it is so incredibly heavy. It is a 1/4 ounce. There's no rattle chamber or anything like that in here. So you have the smallest possible profile made of tungsten. And also, like a lot of times I like to have a rattle style spoon, and then I also like to have like a non-rattle style spoon, because on some days, some bodies of water, sometimes not having rattles is actually critical. So this is going to be a super good option, and you're going to get a way smaller profile than you would honestly expect. Like you're going to pick this thing up and you're going to be like, oh, that's an 1/8, or maybe even smaller, like a 1/10 or something. But no, that's a 1/4. So if you're fishing in 20 feet of water, I mean, that thing's going to get down like, a stinking hammer. And then you got this little guy right here, which honestly on camera here, like doesn't even do justice to how small this is. Like this is just a teeny tiny little thing. And this is a 1/32 ounce size. So, a lot of different things you can do with this, right? You can fish this for panfish. But another thing you could do is you could swap out for a bigger treble hook and just use this as like a teeny tiny little chunk of tungsten with like a full minnow on here. And I think that would be like a really cool walleye setup. So obviously we're talking about spoons. These things are insanely versatile. You could use this 1/4 ounce for, fishing for lake trout or something. It's like maybe a little bit small, but it'd be like a finesse package. But you can use it for walleyes, anything like that. So you can go anywhere from like predators like pike or lake trout or walleyes all the way down to, basically like bluegills, essentially, crappies and perch and bluegills and stuff like that. So all the way from 1/4 ounce down to 1/32 ounce, like there's just infinite possibilities and options to do with these spoons. So I think they're great, and I'm super glad that we have these in tungsten now personally. So
Yeah, one of my favorite forage spoon, is like the lightest one, the smallest one. And now that we got it in tungsten, that thing is just so tiny. I think it's got to be the smallest spoon in the ice market.
it
And
is.
that thing's just gonna
Yeah.
be a straight killer for, when you really gotta be finesse on using spoons for panfish. And
There is no spoon on the market like this one.
no,
This is like, it is the smallest. It's the, lightest tungsten spoon. I mean, it is just like, it's a very unique spoon. And that spoon right there is something I am definitely going to play with for a lot of different things.
I
Um,
it's cute, and when you got that on, you're dialed. Like,
yeah.
just like, having that return on the end of your line through the ice when there's slush and everything. That's just once you fish with a tungsten spoon through the ice, like, you just want to fish with tungsten. So, like, having other tungsten spoons in our lineup, like, we just knew that we needed to do this in the forage spoon as well, because it's just like you said, the ultimate perfect spoon to do in tungsten. You get down to that small size and you can just be super finessey.
Yeah. No, it sounds a little silly, but you legitimately, if a fish is nipping at your bait, and they're just kind of like nipping on whatever you have down underneath. Like a lot of times you'll feel that bite, but like when they choke up and hit the tungsten, you can legitimately feel their teeth, their mouth actually hitting the tungsten as they grab it. So um, sometimes, if you can just feel so much more, and if it's hard to describe without, you going on the ice and doing it 200
Hmm.
times or whatever. But once you're used to kind of how it feels, you can sort of feel when they grab it a little bit lower, and then you can kind of know not to set the hook until you feel them, actually choke up on the bait. And that just depends. Obviously, some fish are just going to come in and woof the whole bait. Walleyes do that all the time. Pike do that all the time. But some fish just like to nip on it. Panfish do, bass do, sometimes walleyes do. So anyway, something to think about.
It helps with, the up bite that crappies will do on you too. You that tungsten is just it's just weighted down. Like,
Yeah.
it's you can't explain it until you're doing it. But yeah, fishing with tungsten is just so much nicer.
That's the one thing we don't talk about a lot too. Yeah, is when you're using tungsten, you can still have that small profile, but have a bait that's heavy enough that it's stretching out your line.
Yeah.
And that is always the biggest thing when you're finesse fishing, you know, uh, especially if you're chasing. The biggest mistake I see people make is use line that's, 8 or 10 pounds, and it has a lot of memory in it. And, maybe they have an 1/8 ounce spoon or something. And you can just see that like the lure isn't even like pulling the bait down, so they can't feel the bite because there's literally like slack in their line that
Hmm.
needs to be, straightened out or pulled out. So with tungsten, you can take, dude, this fish is so heavy, this 1/4 ounce. I mean, it fish is
Yeah.
so heavy. If you're using heavy line, like this is going to straighten it out. So you can just fish in this profile. It's like an 1/8 ounce profile, so you get something that's definitely like a smaller, more finesse, normal size, and you get it heavier. So like you can feel things so much better.
And that's something, having something without a rattle, a spoon without a rattle, is like big for, like, oftentimes Mille Lacs. Brad talks about that a lot.
Yep.
There's times where he needs to be fishing something that's finesse and not doesn't have any sound. So, like, we have the tungsten slim spoon that doesn't have a rattle, but it's got that little kicker blade that is also adding some sound to it. So this is just another step in that finesse category for walleye spoons. And I know Brad's gonna be pumped about these.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. I mean, you just look at, it's made out of tungsten. You have these different sizes. You look at the profile. of it. It is just like a staple profile. There's like a little bit of curve as you're coming across here. So I guess what I'm getting at is like this is going to be a staple forever, honestly.
Mhm.
Like this will always have utility. I'll probably end up with these spoons, that I got last year, and I'll probably have them in my tackle box for 10, 20 years, as long as they don't get bit off. Like there will
Right.
always be application for these. It's just such a bread and butter profile and use application. So yeah, I'm a big fan of it, and I'm glad that they finally did that. So
All right. So what's the last one that we got coming? This one's a little bit different.
so this one is actually, it's kind of an open water bait, right?
Yep.
But we got the tungsten bobber jig. Okay, so we're not fishing too many bobbers through the ice, right? So what is the utility of this through the ice?
So this bobber jig is going to be, the perfect lure to put down on a set line or a tip up or a rattle reel. It's got a wider gap on it so you can put a live minnow on there, put it down there, and just let the minnow go to work.
And why is it? What's that?
And it's got flat sides all around it, so it's going to show up, on your sonar really good, so you can see when fish are coming to check out that minnow.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's kind of interesting if you're watching the video version of this podcast. So you tie onto the line tie up on the top, obviously, and then how this bait is actually going to sit. It's going to sit just like this. What am I doing here? It's going to sit just like this, like super vertically.
Mm-hmm.
So this hook is actually pointed straight up, and I think in a lot of cases that's just going to be conducive to a better hookup rate. There's a nice wide gap, so you could put a big sucker minnow on this, but you can still put smaller, just like fatheads and stuff like that. So obviously, you know sucker minnows, shiner minnows under a set line, there's like a lot of utility to that. But sometimes I just like to have fatheads because they're so much easier and convenient. And I've caught a lot of walleyes on fatheads, underneath a tip up or whatever. So this is going to be nice because it's got the tungsten weight built in right here, which does a couple things. Obviously, it eliminates the need to, pinch weights up on your line up above, like a plain single hook or a plain treble. But another thing that it does as well is it kind of pins the minnow in place. So like for me, the ideal situation with this setup is going to be like in a perfect best case scenario world, I have like a big shiner on this thing.
Mm-hmm.
So what that weight is going to do, like a big lively shiner, you want your bait to be lively. But one big issue you can run into is um, your bait will swim away from the walleyes or the perch or whatever you're chasing. So actually having this weight right here on the hook, kind of basically in jig form, is going to do a lot to kind of keeping a really lively, good size shiner in a somewhat manageable location for the walleyes to actually chase down and catch. Um, Obviously, the minnows can move super quickly, and you want them to move a little bit. You don't necessarily want them to be just pinned in place. You want them to be able to kind of get away, but weighting them down a little bit is super critical to keep them from being impossible for the walleye to catch. The other thing that you can do as well, this is an additional tip, is you can trim the tail off the minnow a little bit, the tail fin, so they don't have as much push. But these come in a couple different sizes. What do you guys got them in, Chuck?
We got 2 different sizes and I think 4 different colors.
Yep.
We
Yeah.
got a gold, a black, a sunrise, and what's the last one? I think green.
Yeah, I just hopped onto the website here. You guys do have them in white. as
White.
well, and it's black, and yeah. But yeah, a couple different sizes. This is actually the big one right here, the 1/8 ounce, and then there is a 16th ounce as well. So I think I will mostly be using 16th ounce, but the 1/8 ounce I do honestly think has a lot of applications specifically for when you're using big minnows. So like big shiners, um, or like big, good size suckers, stuff like that. Or honestly, like you think of having a smaller profile when the bite is tough. But if it's like a cold front or something and the fish are not chasing very much, I do think upsizing to something a little bit heavier to pin that fish a little bit more can be critical because even something like this in a 16th ounce is, going to give that minnow a little bit of an ability to move. So those are a few of my thoughts and considerations when I'm looking at this bait.
Yeah, one thing you pointed out earlier, and it's kind of the reason we designed it. So we started out designing it for open water, right? So a lot of people came to us, and a lot of people are fishing, a jig that's sitting like this in the water under your bobber. And we didn't have the ideal jig that sits vertical like that when fish are coming up to eat the lure from underneath. They're like, guys are coming to us like, we want a hook that's sitting vertical. And that's what this design came from. And then, talking to other guys in the development process, like, this is the ultimate set line for ice fishing.
Hmm.
So we were like, that makes perfect sense, and started fishing it that way. And we're launching it here in this ice season. So,
Yeah. Heck yeah. Well, you guys should have named it the tip up jig, not the bobber jig.
well, you can still put a bobber up above it too.
That's true.
That's
That is,
technically what a rattle reel is.
yeah. I will
Kind
definitely be using this quite a bit, playing with it quite a bit on the ice, like underneath tip ups, finicky foolers, stuff like that. And also just like the one thing I like to do is have a dead stick rod like right next to me, especially if I'm fishing in a house or something. It's fun to use like a rattle bait and jig a rattle bait and kind of work that. Use forward facing to kind of look around and kind of see, what's going on. But then have like some sort of set line right next to you. So you can call them in with the rattle bait. And then, you might get them interested and they're like, ooh, what is that? And then they'll kind of meander over and they'll be like, ooh, look at that. That's just a big minnow sitting there. I think I'll probably just grab that. It looks a lot easier and a lot tastier. So just putting this like on a dead stick rod, I think, and just letting it sit there. And then also, you can kind of see when that fish loses interest in your, jigging presentation and goes over to that minnow. Obviously, the minnow is so much more realistic.
of.
So you can either just let it sit there and wait for the fish to grab it, or if they're staring at it for a really long time, you can grab the rod, lift it up, kind of work it a little bit, maybe pop it up in the air and kind of let the minnow and the jig kind of flutter back into its location or whatever. So a lot of things you can play with. But yeah, long story short, this will be great for set lines, but I will also probably actively jig this a little bit
Yeah.
with a full minnow on it. So kind of like, I used to do with the forage minnow jig quite a bit.
Awesome. So we said that was all we have for new ice, but we also have size extensions in the Smeltinator, specifically kind of for category you talked about earlier, and that's lake trout.
Yes. Yeah, heck yeah. No, there's a full 1 ounce option and a 3/4 ounce option now.
So
And
that's huge for getting down to those deep fish and making them chase a minnow style lure. So
yeah.
that's something that you also played with this summer a little bit.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, I think, obviously when people think about the Smeltinator,
It's just like
they're
you
thinking
can
about,
do anything with it.
yeah, yeah. And of course it like got popular with bass fishing. And like walleye guys have definitely gravitated towards it because it's got just a crazy good hook, awesome, head profile, all that good stuff. So like walleye guys have gravitated towards that a lot, myself included. So yeah, the 3/4 ounce and 1 ounce head, you slap a big paddle tail on there, and you're just gonna have like a super awesome profile for big walleyes. Like up in Canada, we use that a lot for suspended walleyes, a lot specifically. And then, yeah, it's like obviously a super great pike jig as well, because it's just such a good hook. Like you're not gonna bend it out, it's just like just an all around great jig. But that being said, one thing that's super popular, I shouldn't say super popular, but one thing that's really effective for lake trout through the ice, and I love lake trout, like we talked about earlier, is a heavy jig head with like a bigger paddle tail on it, So like the 4-inch eye candy is a great option. That's not a giant plastic, but like there's a lot of bulk there. It's just like a good, bigger, bulky paddle tail. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll actually take like, I really like the 3/4 ounce paired with that 4-inch eye candy paddle shad, and dropping that vertically, fishing that vertically. Lake trout, the thing is, it's like, I mean, there's so many things you can do, right? You can fish finessey flutter spoons, you can fish tubes, you can fish rattle baits. But one of the biggest things, and I shouldn't even say, I was going to say, especially in the forward facing era, but I don't even know that that's true, because speed has always been super important, even when you're just using 2D sonar, because like a lot of times when we're ice fishing for lake trout, we might be in 70 feet of water and you're just kind of working the column, right? Like you jig 10 feet off the bottom and then you reel up and you jig 25 feet off the bottom and then you jig 45 feet off the bottom and you're just working the column because these fish can be anywhere. I always try to stay on the higher half usually because lake trout can see extremely well, and being higher in the water column is just really critical for just having a little bit of extra drawing power with lake trout. But that being said, even if you have 2D sonar and you're, let's say you're jigging 20 feet below the surface or 15 feet below the surface and you see a mark down at 40, or, you see a mark starting to flicker on the edge of your screen at 40, that a fish is coming towards you, and you got to get down there fast, right? Because you want to put the bait in front of the fish so they can see it and get them. So having that heavier jig is super critical. Where if you're using just like a 1/4 ounce spoon or something like that, it's going to take longer to get down there, but you can have a big plastic profile that does create a lot of drag in the water, but you can get it down a lot faster. And it allows you to have plastics that move a lot of water, but you can still move the bait really quickly. So being able to be super fast is just key with lake trout. And yeah, those heavier jigs are ideal because that 3/4 ounce one has a 5/0 hook on it, and the 1 ounce has a 7/0 hook. So you can put like big boy plastics on there. It's gonna be perfect, and you could catch 30+ pound lake trout on it, and fight them for 20 minutes and not have a problem.
Yeah, it's got the ultimate hook on it for any size as big as you can get. Yeah.
Yeah.
And one thing, you find with lake trout is sometimes they want to eat it on fall. So you need to have that bait, falling at a good speed, because you're toying around with them. They might want to eat it up, but as soon as they stop, you know, engaging on your bait, you just flip the bail, and sometimes all of a sudden the bait will just stop.
Yeah.
And they're eating it on fall. And
yeah.
that's a fun bite right there.
Super fun.
Because then you're just reeling in to set the hook because they got it.
Yeah, and a lot of times with lake trout, like they the faster you can move it, the more amped up and willing to bite they're gonna be. Like if you're just slowly taking it away from them, that ain't the deal. So the faster it goes down, the better. And so, or the faster it moves, the better. So in a lot of cases, like you can reel up as fast as you can back up to the surface, and you can't take it away from them fast enough, right? But a
Exactly.
lot of times they'll follow it and they'll tail it so hard, and you can't believe they didn't grab it. And then you got to work it back down, right?
Yeah.
So a slower drop speed can be okay for that, but a lot of times a faster drop speed is great because they'll follow it right back down as fast as they followed it up. So, and like you said, a lot of times they'll grab it on the way down. So yeah, heck yeah, you're on the money with that.
Yeah, that's just one of the most fun ways to catch fish through the ice. Lake trout are insane.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
We were at Fort Peck, I think last year. We've gone a couple times, and we've had the tube, level head predator tube shine one trip, and then this last trip, the new Smeltinator, heavy Smeltinator with the minnow style plastic on it was definitely, our top producer. So
Yeah, yep,
that's
yeah,
something that you're gonna have a box that says lake trout on it, and you're gonna have Smeltinators in it.
oh
I
yeah,
don't know.
100%. And I've got the same thing for lake for walleyes as well. I have Smeltinators for walleyes as well. So like I've got my Lake Winnipeg box right here, and I don't have any of the heavy Smeltinators in there, right? Because you're not fishing very deep.
Right.
Just not like super necessary. You probably would benefit from having those big hooks. But like I've got Smeltinator, like a Smeltinator underspin here. And like I'll put salted minnows on here, or like a minnow style plastic or a paddle tail. And it's kind of like the same thing. Like the Winnipeg walleyes they'll eat it. And then like you've got like a super awesome hook, but like a lot of times the flash of like a blade like this will be super, super helpful for, getting the attention and just kind of triggering strikes for walleyes, especially Winnipeg walleyes. But guys have been using like bladed jigs. Would you call this a bladed jig? Would that be the name of the category? Or underspin? I guess underspin's probably better. Guys have been using underspins for walleyes on Lake Winnipeg for a long time. Like they'll use them for like set lines a lot. Like they'll put some salted minnows on here and just let this thing dangle underneath a tip up or whatever.
Yep.
But this right here is the ultimate underspin because it has the absolute best hook. It has super good components here. Like this spins insanely easily. Yeah. So anyway, that's not a new product, but we're just talking about the wide variety of different applications for, some of these jigs, from open water, Bassmaster Classic all the way to lake trout fishing, through the ice or whatever.
So we kind of talked about this at the beginning, but just want to go over, what do you do to prep for the ice season? Like I'm not really at much of a stage besides just, mental, just kind of thinking about, what's coming up and how fast it's coming up.
Yeah. Yeah, no, there is like so much stuff to do because
I
like
know you're talking about trying to come up with some cool ideas to mod your snowmobile for all your trips and
yeah,
stuff like that. So I know
yeah,
that's on your mind.
yeah, 100%, man. It's there's so much gear associated to ice fishing, and once ice season is here, I mean, I'm going super, super hard, and there's like a wide variety of things that I'm doing on the ice. So you kind of have to have different specialized gear for all those things. Obviously, like if you're just going out on an average weekend, like it's not the end of the world. You can kind of just have some of your stuff and you're good to go.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, like I'm going up to Canada for walleye fishing on Lake Winnipeg, and that's way different than walleye fishing around home. And then going up lake trout fishing in Canada, and then I'm going to the Dakotas for walleyes or perch, and I'm around home and I'm chasing walleyes, bluegills, crappies, all the stuff. So there's so many like things that you have to be prepared for. So for me, some of the first things I'll do is like I'll just make sure my fish houses are in good shape, because I can't always guarantee that I won't get like mice and stuff in them. I try and take all the precautions I can to keep everything cleaned and stored and, stored well and whatever. But just making sure some of that stuff didn't, get any issues over the summer is step number one. And then a very important step number two is I like to make sure my snowmobile's running good. So like do all the maintenance on the snowmobile because I live on the snowmobile 85% of the ice season. Like I'll fish off of it, I'll use it to get across the lake. Even when we get to midwinter and you can start using trucks, like I like to use the snowmobile because I can just fish way more efficiently off of it. And then also you never really have to worry about getting stuck. And if you do stumble into some more dangerous conditions, which you just never know when you're on the ice, but especially when you're going on trips, up north or somewhere more remote, you don't know where there might be like thin ice or slush or something like that. So a snowmobile is just so effective all winter long, basically. So making sure that thing is super dialed in as far as some of the modifications is really big for me. Having places on the snowmobile where you can mount things so you can just be really efficient with your electronics and your baits and your rods and stuff like that is super critical. So fish house stuff, snowmobile stuff, gotta, maintain the trailer as well that you're pulling it on. But from there, like a lot of the stuff just works easy and good all the time. Like, augers are usually pretty reliable now that we have electric augers. And but aside from that, like, I may respool some of my rods, heading into early ice as well, getting some line on there. And then another thing that I do as well, which I did grab these because I thought maybe there'd be a chance we'd talk about that, is like I like to sort of load different boxes with different fishing trips or fishing applications in mind. So like when I go on a trip, I'll bring it up again. When I go on a trip to Lake Winnipeg, this is what I'm bringing up to Lake Winnipeg. Like
just one box with all the essentials, basically.
Pretty much, right? Like I'm going to drive 7 hours somewhere and be there for 5 days. You'd think you'd have 5 boxes of stuff, because you have to try a bunch of things and you don't know what's going to work. And you got to have a lot of it. Well, a lot of times you grab 3 things out of each of those boxes, over the course of 5 days. So I like to kind of like make a quote unquote day box for like all these different trips. So when I go to Winnipeg, like I've got my rattle baits in here, I've got a rip and shad. I got some of these guys right here, the rattle trap type stuff. I've got some of these underspin jigs. And then on Winnipeg specifically, they really like big spoons. This is going to be difficult to pull out of the box here, but like big old, what's that?
I said, oh yeah, that's the thumper spoon. That was killer for me on Lake Winnipeg last time.
This is just like a staple. This thing is super sick. So anyway, I guess long story short, like I will take, I will make like a whole box and just always have that, with everything I need. And another thing too that I really like doing like specialty boxes with is like I will go to Lake Winnipeg. That's in Manitoba. It's all barbless in Manitoba. So I'll actually pinch all the barbs off a lot of these ahead of time so I can just jump into the box and grab what I need. But on the other hand, like right here, I've got like this will be a go-to box for me. I'll probably use this like crazy on early ice here in Minnesota. And it's just got like smaller rattle baits in it.
Yep.
And then it's got like all different types of spoons, right? So we got, it's always a struggle getting these out of the box, all the treble hooks. It's got little glass buckshots. Definitely one of my favorites. I mean, there's a bunch of different spoons in here, honestly. Coffin spoon. Those things kill on Red Lake early. I got normal buckshots in here.
How
I got-
how often do you fish with like a snap on the end of your line to the ice?
I actually use snaps most of the time.
Most of the time.
Most of the time, believe it or not. So, you're talking about the twitch and puppet. I would say I will probably use a small snap with that. A lot of times, I would tie it direct too. With something like the tungsten bobber jig, not going to put a snap on that.
Yeah.
But like I would say 90 something percent of the time, 90 something percent of the time with spoons, I'm going to put a snap on here for sure. And I also use a swivel like basically 100% of the time with spoons as well. So
Yeah.
snap and a swivel, not a snap swivel because that's too much bulk, I would say, right there, right next to your spoon, but a snap right above your spoon and then a swivel like 3 feet or 2 or 3 feet above your spoon. So yeah, so I got all different types of jigs, spoons in here, including some of the tungsten forge stuff and whatever. So I also honestly have just like plain treble hooks in there as well. So you have a couple different looks for set lines, whether that's just like a plain hook or like a little bobber jig like that. So
When you're using a swivel just to avoid line twists, right?
yep.
And are you using a snap just so you can change lures fast, or is that adding, action to your bait, or what's your mindset on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you could definitely argue with some baits that it probably does add a little bit more action. Some guys will tie loop knots on some of their baits, because the loop shape, having the line tie there in the loop shape, like it does allow for a little bit more freedom of action. So with that in mind, I do think there probably are some benefits with some baits. But for me, the reason why I like it the most is because it allows me to switch out baits really quickly, try different colors, try different sizes and
Yeah.
profiles and stuff like that, and be able to do it quick without having to retie. And retying is annoying for multiple reasons. Like number one, it just takes more time. You have to retie something. And number two, like if you keep on retying, like your leader will get shorter and shorter. And then eventually you're going to have to cut off the swivel and tie the swivel back on and make another leader that's longer. And if you're retying that, the leader is going to get shorter and shorter. So it's just like a huge hassle long term to not have a snap. And I don't think it matters that much for most baits. You're obviously not going to have a snap with like a tungsten jig, like a tungsten panfish jig. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
there's no reason to do that. And that will negatively, affect the action of the bait and make it, just have too much hardware for the fish. But with spoons and stuff, I don't think it matters.
Another thing is just when it's so cold outside, it's the last thing you want to do is try to tie a knot when your hands aren't working properly. So that's that's why I like the snaps. I can just switch from tungsten buckshot to the tungsten forge spoon or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
But
Heck yeah. No, I 100% agree. That is all those like little optimizations are super critical when you're on the ice because, if you're not dialed in, you're going to have cold hands or you're going to have, whatever. There's just like a lot of variables.
All right. So what's one thing you might always forget on an ice trip or when you get out there? What's something that you're like, gosh, I forgot it again? Is there anything that you always forget?
Oh, that's a good one. I would say a couple things that I forget sometimes, which is super annoying, is like an ice scoop. A lot of times I forget my ice scoop. A lot of times I forget a bump board too. Like if I want to know how long something is, or like how many times have you like laid something up against your fishing rod, and you're like, well, my fishing rod's 32 inches or whatever, and like,
That's how you catch all those giants that you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. The
Because then
26 is growing to 29s.
yeah, it's much easier to add a couple inches.
Yeah, exactly. No, so that's like a rule. Like it's stupid, but just like a ruler is something I forget a lot. But yeah, I don't know. Like sometimes, like some of my batteries on different things, I won't plug them in, and I'll forget about it or whatever.
Yeah.
And there was another one I was thinking of too. What was that? Oh, like pliers. That's always like you'd think you'd be dialed with having pliers ready, but like you catch a fish and you throw them in the snow, and then you're like, where are they? And blah blah
Yeah.
blah. But like,
That's the one for me for sure.
yeah,
I don't forget them anymore because I did it too much, and now I just like put them in every pocket of my backpack or whatever it might be, so like I can't ever run out of them.
yeah, exactly. And I don't like to keep them in my pocket because like I like to put my hands in my pocket a lot, or like I don't want them poking a hole through my pocket.
Yeah.
So like yeah, but it's always a battle of like where did I put the pliers, or and you can't just have it's not like a boat. Usually you can't just like have them sitting somewhere. I mean, I guess you can sometimes, but usually you have to pack everything up when you ice fish because like
Yeah.
you have to traverse across the lake or whatever. So that's a good question though.
Yeah. That's you definitely can't forget the auger. That I feel like I've probably done that before. I know Donnie told me a story one time where he went way out 20 plus miles or whatever it was, and he only brought one auger. He said that it didn't work and it ruined the whole guide trip.
This
So
guy,
he always brought two, but
yeah, what do you say? His said his clients are like he like couldn't, it was broken or whatever. I think like the pull start broke or something, and he's like
yeah.
the clients are like, well, what do we do now? And Donnie's like, go home.
Yeah. Yeah. Poor Donnie.
Yeah,
But
that's a big one. Step number
yeah.
one for ice fishing is like you got to get a hole in the ice. Like that is the biggest thing. As long as you can get a hole in the ice, you can really get away with being, kind of a crap show in a bunch of other ways. But as long as you got a hole in the ice, that's a good first step. So I honestly I always have like 5 batteries with me. When I go on a trip, like I will have another auger in my truck. And then also another thing I do is I always bring a power drill with me, like in my snowmobile. I always have one of those stored in there.
Yep.
So even if we're out like 15 miles and the auger breaks or something, which I've never had happen, um, if the power head breaks or something, I could take the, auger bit and I can put it on my power drill, and then I can, shoot some holes through the ice that way. So yeah, that's one of the biggest things I will say about ice fishing is just having so many backups and just like always being prepared for things. And like, you don't have to bring 2 augers with you out on the ice to have a backup. You can have a little power drill,
Mhm.
or something. Obviously like the bit itself or the blades could break as well. So yeah, bring extra bring extra blades. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
One problem I had last year is we went out to go fish for burbot, and we only brought a 6-inch bit, auger bit, and the only thing we brought was a LS-34, and we couldn't get the live scope pull down,
oh
and we
really?
had like 2.5 feet of ice, so it was just miserable trying to get that to work. But
Did you end up drilling some like double holes and stuff like that?
yeah, it's much harder than it sounds.
It is super not easy, especially with a smaller size auger. Like a 6-inch
Yeah,
is so much harder to drill a double hole than it is with like a 10-inch auger or whatever. So yeah, it
exactly.
is really tricky. And some augers are way better at it than others.
Right.
Like the straight bladed augers with kind of the circle around it or whatever. Like Ion has those. Those are so much easier to drill like a double hole. You just put it right next to it and you just drill, and it cuts through it like it's smooth, like it's nothing. versus like the Mora blade style auger with the curved blades and stuff. Those are so much harder to drill a double hole with. So
Yeah, it's even harder with the, even you got a smaller bit. Those are harder to drill next to each other than a bigger one. So
yes,
it was
yeah.
just the biggest struggle. But
don't bring, moral of the story, if you get one thing away from this podcast, don't bring a 6-inch auger out fishing for burbot.
yeah, exactly.
Or don't have a 6-inch auger if you're planning on using live scope.
Yeah. So something to keep in mind, because I'm sure we're not the only ones that have done that before. So
well, some people might show up to, Fleet Farm or Shields or whatever, and like they want to buy a new auger, or maybe at the ice show, and they plan on using forward facing, and they're like, oh, man, you missed it. There was a big rush. We had a sale. We're basically out of augers. We got some 6 inches left, and you start thinking, and you're like, yeah, 6-inch will probably work. It's like, well, not if you plan on sticking that scope down the hole.
yeah, I think most people probably use like an 8.
Yeah, that would be the most common. Yeah. But I do think the panfish world, there is like a pretty good group of guys who still like to use 6s and 5s and stuff like that. But a lot of like the diehard panfish guys will have like a 5 or a 6-inch auger for fishing, but like when they're scoping or using forward facing, like they have an 8. They'll have like an 8 just for hunting. But the 6 and the 5, you can just like rip through the ice so fast. So you can cut through 2 feet of ice significantly quicker, with the smaller augers. So yeah, so that's that.
I got hooks in me.
I was about to say, what are you working on over there? Yeah.
All right. All right, Nick. Well, tell the listeners, where to find you. I know you got a YouTube channel, social media. Let them know where they can find Nick Lindner.
Yeah, you can look for me on my YouTube channel and on social media. No, yeah, most of the good stuff, I would say, like on the internet, if you want to check it out and learn more and see more and whatever, I would definitely go. I have a YouTube channel. If you just type in Nick Lindner, it'll pop up. Yeah, especially for ice fishing, type in Nick Lindner ice fishing, whatever, like, it'll just pop right up there. And then also I make a ton of videos specifically for Northland as well. So they put them all over the place, but you can find them on YouTube as well if you type in Northland Tackle. And actually, if you go on there, I would say at least, in the coming weeks here as we lead up to the ice season, there is going to be a lot of content, because we did go out last winter and shoot a bunch of stuff with Twitchin' Puppet, tungsten forage spoon, and a bunch of other stuff. So there's going to be a bunch of content coming from late ice last year with some of these new baits, if you do want a closer look at some of them and get some of that proof in the pudding, catching fish on them and whatever. If you want to see some of that, check out Northland Tackle's website, YouTube channel specifically. So that content is, some of it's starting to come out already, but a lot of it's going to be coming out here in the coming weeks as well. So I would say I would point people in those two directions. It would be my thought process. So
yeah, awesome. We're going to have a bunch of cool stuff coming. So ice will be here shortly and we're ready to get after it.
Yep. Get your shoes tied on tight. It's going to be here before you know it.
Exactly. All right. Thanks, Nick.
Yep. Thanks for having me on, Chuck. Always a pleasure.
That's right.
Oh, there we go. Oh my gosh, this is